Hi. So today I'm going to take a demo class for computer science, and I believe that problem solving could be a best way to start on what computer science is, and how do you go about it, and all those things. So computer science, right? So the first or the important part, or the I wouldn't say maybe more than important part, it would be like the foundation, right? Is knowing how to solve a problem at hand. So it could start off when we're just starting off. It could be as simple as finding the sum of two numbers, and then it could go as big as detecting a face, or or detecting the emotions in a person and whatnot, right, nowadays. So now let's just dive in further on what problem solving is, and then let's go on further and see different things, right? So how do you solve a problem, right? So before you kind of solve a problem, right, there are different steps, which indirectly we do it, but yeah, when we kind of do it in uh, terms of definitions, right? Let's say, what do you do, like the steps, right? You define the problem, right? First you understand, or define, what is that I have to solve in hand. Now, for example, right, let's say that I have some kind of pen, right? Let's just imagine that I have a pen. Now, let's just think of it as I have this kind of pen, and now the problem here is that I have to open this pen. Okay, let's make it simple like that. That I have to open a pen. So what do I do? First defining the problem is how do I open this pen, right? Now there's great ideas, right? How do I open this pen? So the first part to understand is, does it have a cap, right? Or is it like some pens, that they have this back where you kind of push it and the nib comes out? Is it like that, right? Or is it something else? So you kind of generate the idea, or so maybe you just become so idealistic, like you would be like, okay, I'll open the the back part of that, where you keep the nib, and then I open the pen like that, right? So you generate different ideas, then you evaluate the solutions, right? So let's say this opening the pen, right? Now if I just open it like this and I use it to write, right, then I can actually write using it, right? Now, but if now let's say that someone said, like, you press on the back, right? If it's not a pen which has a button on the back where which pushes and brings in the nib, then it's not that process, or that solution will not work for this pen, right? Because it's something cap specific pen, right? You open the cap and you get it. Now let's say something else, right? You can just twist the back, right, of the pen, and then get the nib out. But will that be useful in the way that you want to write using that pen, right? It might be difficult to write it without the body, right? With just the refill, it might be difficult to write. So you kind of evaluate, and then you next part is then you implement it, right? You open it and implement it, and then let's say you remove the back of the pen, right? And then you took the refill. So when you write it, right, you evaluate, after you have implemented and took it out, you evaluate whether you are able to do it, right? The problem is that you have to open the pen, and then you have to write it. So are you able to write it, right? Those kind of things come in, and then you decide, okay, so the solution might be, at least for this case, right, it could be that you open the pen and you write it, not take out the nib or push from the back or anything like that. So every problem, right, it can be necessarily thought of as a day-to-day problem. Okay, so let's go through an example, right, more specific than a pen or anything, right? Let's go through an example. Let's say that you want to find, like, a simple one, right? You want to find the sum of 1 and 2. Okay, so you want to find the sum of 1 and 2. What you would do, you will say 1 plus 2, like you kind of take your finger and then 1 plus 2, right? 2, and then it's 3. Now let's say you want to write a computer program on that, right? Now in our case, since we are going to do on Python, we will be like, okay, we take the IDE, and then we do 1 plus 2, which gives us the output 3, as seen in the figure. Right. Now you think, okay, now now the person who has asked you, right, 1 plus 2, she's saying, okay, good, right? Here she's saying that you're good. Now tell me, what is 2 plus 3? Then you go back, and then this you have 2 plus 3. Then you say, okay, it's 5. And then she's very, very good. Now, can you give me a more generalized way, right, to do it? So then you will be like, yeah, I could do that, but then you could ask questions, like, like if she says, find the sum of numbers, right? You say, how many are the numbers, right? Is there a definite thing? So she says yes, right? I would always want to find the sum of two numbers. So you will be like, okay, fine, I understood your question. Okay, it's sum of two numbers. And then you go back and you think, right, how do I find the sum of two numbers? So then you kind of evaluate, right? After you found out the problem, what is sum of two, one and two, then you ideas, and then someone asks you two and three. Then after that you think, okay, two and three she told. Now she's saying, find the sum of more numbers, right? Then you kind of evaluate, okay, how will I find a more generalized way to approach the problem, right? Then you kind of find the solution. So now let's say you want to find a generalized way, right? So she told you two numbers, right? So so you just first kind of map out the steps, right? Find the sum of two numbers. So there will be two numbers. So what you would do, you have to have input for the two numbers. So then you think, okay, in Python, how do I find an input? How do I get an input from the user? It's using the input function. So input function is the function which helps you get the input from the user. Okay, now you're like, okay, I found the input from the user. But you have to, when you get a function, you have to think, okay, what does input return back? It would be returning back a string, right? But you want to find the sum of two numbers, right? So, and then for simplicity, let's keep that as integer numbers. Okay, then you'll be like, okay, how can I convert the value I got from input, right? How can I convert it to string? Convert to integer, right? Convert the integer, right? So that is the input. Now let's say input you want to convert an integer. So int is the function to do that. Now we are like, okay, fine, right? I found the way how to get the input. I found the way how to convert it an int because I want to find the sum of two numbers. Then you go about and do it. Now, when you get the input, right, in most cases we kind of store it in some variable. Then you are like, okay, fine, how do I store it? So for storing, you have to use a simple thing, right? You have to just use a simple equation equal to, let's say, given by a user. First, you have to get the given by the user or given as an input. So let's give it more as an input, right? Input, which will give you the numbers. Now, as we mentioned, right, it should be of type int. Now, whatever is returned from input should be given as an input to the function int, so that it takes it and converts it into what? An integer. Okay. Now, similarly, you have num2 where you have to get an input, but it should be converted into an integer. Right? Once you have both of these, what do? You do print. So you basically print it, right? So you want to print num1 plus num2, right? And then you save. Now let me just kind of run this program. Okay, so there is no, we have not given any string here to say any, we have not given any statement or any, info to the user. So we know we have written the program, we know it. So we give 1, then we give 2, and then we get the output as 3, right? 1 plus 2 is 3. Now let's say that they're saying, okay, find the sum of two numbers given as an input by the user, and then give specific, give some some user-friendly message, right? Friendly message. Okay, let's say that's what we want to do. Sorry for that string out. Okay, so now then we say, okay, enter the first number. Then you say enter the second number. Okay. Kind of send it like this: sum of the above numbers. Okay. Now you run the program. Enter the first number, right? So it's saying enter the first number. We give 1. Second number 2. Then it gives sum of the above two numbers is 3. Okay. Now let's say you don't like it, right? It's like it's the same line. It's not readable or clear, right? You give a new line. This is called a new line. Where you give a backslash and an n. So the backslash is called an escape sequence. Okay. So you kind of do the same. Enter the first number. So I will not save the program. Right. So let's do it. Enter the first number 1. Second number 2, and the sum of the above two numbers is 3, right? Now let's say the problem changes, right? You told, okay, this is the output. Now someone says, it's good that you were able to find the output. All right. Now, will you be able to do any operation, right? Which I give for these two numbers. So you say, okay, what are the operations that you want to do? Then they are like, I want to, let's say that if it's a plus, right? If it's a plus, then you find the sum product, right? And copy it and then plus, right? You have to give some difference product based on what the user says, right? If he says plus, minus, into, right? So can you write a program to find the sum if a plus symbol is specified by the user, minus is the difference, and then into if it's mentioned, right? Okay, operator, and then you give. So it's not integer or anything, right? So you can directly use the input symbol, and you say enter the operation to be performed. Right? Then you give okay, and then what you do? Okay, so you have this in the operator. So then you say if the operator equal to some value, then you do a particular thing, right? Then if the operator equal to some other value, it will equal to this one, right? So you say if the operator equal to a plus, give me the difference. If the operator equal to a minus, give me the difference. If it's equal to a x, give me the product. So what do you now into 2, and then you change it here, the product. Okay, and you do that. Now let's say, okay, so you know that, okay, plus minus. Now let's kind of try to run it, right? So it's saying enter the first number 1, enter the second number 2. Let's do the operation. I'm saying, okay, I want the sum itself. It gives a sum. I give, let's try one more, right? I give minus. Okay. So what happened? This is not a 1. This is not a symbol in any of these, right? So it does not give us an output. So we then do, okay, fine. That was a wrong one, right? Then I give us a minus. It gives difference is minus 1 because it's num1 minus num2. And the num1, which is the first number, is greater than num2, right? So now let's try one more where you do the product, right? I do x and it says the product of the two numbers is 2. But what we figure out here is, right, it can, so we just want to know if it's a plus, minus or x. You don't want to, kind of do an if for everything. If it's this, then we don't want to do any of the other operation. If it's already plus, right, you don't want to go about and see if it's minus or into, because plus is plus, right? You cannot be again minus or into just after this line, and because you're not going to kind of change anything. So what you can do is you can say else if it is this, else if it is this, and else if it is something else. So we should do something called elif, which is the short form of else if in or which is the equivalent of else if in Python. So we use something called an elif, where you say, okay, if it's plus, you do this, and then don't do any of these. Just don't even worry whether it is a minus or an into. Just complete it off. But let's say if else if it's a this. So what it happens is if the first operation becomes true, it doesn't go to any subsequent operations. And then, right, so it doesn't go to any subsequent operations. And then what we could do is we could have something like operation successful, which would kind of helps us understand that, okay, the operation was done. Now, as we had seen in the previous example, right, where we give some other operator other than this plus, minus or multiply, then we don't kind of do any operation. So what we could do is we could have a final statement called else, which would be reached in case none of these becomes true. Like if this the if statement or none of the else statements comes true, then the else will be executed, saying that we could just say that let's say print what invalid operation, right? Invalid operation, and we can say that program successfully completed or something like that. Right, now let's kind of save this and then kind of run it out. Now let's say I enter 1, right, 1 and then 2, and then the operation to be performed, let's say something which is not there, right? The program successfully completed, but then it's mentioned invalid operation. But let's go for a different number, and always it's the same. So let's say a multiply, right? It gives product error numbers is 49, and then operation completed, right? Successfully completed is being shown, and then in case of if you give something invalid, it shows invalid operation. So this is all for this demo video. We could discuss more on different things, right? Now this is if else, right? There are other things like loops and for loops and while loops and different conditional statements other than these, or where we kind of discover more on what else can be done using Python. Hope you enjoyed this section, and thank you, for joining in.